Today we're going to be comparing the ES120 with Kawai's previous version, the ES110. What's different about the sound, what's different about the keyboard, other functions, and talking about the speakers, which has really been a big difference. Let's get started with the comparison right away. We had a request come in from one of our viewers and we thought it was a great idea because sometimes we do these back and forth between the older model and the model that is replacing it, and we hadn't done this, and I'm really glad that we got them side by side because the differences have really crystallized for me since having the ES110 and 120 side by side. I would say one of the major differences is the action. The other one that you're really going to notice is going to be your speaker EQ. So not necessarily how the sound presents itself through the headphones, but definitely the speaker EQ. So we're going to cover both of those. The third big difference that you're going to notice is going to be the interface. So we'll quickly talk about that, and then some of the other hidden functionality, which really falls into a Bluetooth category. So first, let's start with the keyboard, because that's one that is just an outright, there's no arguments here. The ES120 has a better keyboard on it than the ES110, hands down. What have they changed? Well, when you read about the spec differences, they have improved the cushioning on this action, but I think it's more than just the cushioning on the individual keys. The entire structure of the key bed just feels more solid, like there's less flex and less give in the instrument when you're really laying into this key bed on the ES120 versus what you had on the ES110. For the same reasons, the keyboard is a lot quieter on the ES120 than the ES110. In fact, let's just do a very quick test right now versus like universe of difference. I hope that's coming through on the mic. In person, it's not a subtle thing. This is, I don't know what the actual difference in decibels is, but like this feels half as quiet, maybe even less than half as quiet as the ES110. And so sound is always, going to be a result of other mechanics going on. That's what's creating the vibration in the first place. This is just a tighter action. The whole thing just feels more solid to really lean in on. And as I said, there's no sense of flex to this instrument even when you're really applying like kind of a full force, like a double or a triple fortissimo. So let's get the volume back up here. Besides that, your action in both cases still have a double sensor, so nothing's changed there. Neither one of them has escapement, nothing's changed there. The official names of the actions haven't really changed. On some of Kawai's website, you will see this marketed as the, I think, improved responsive hammer compact, whereas this is just the responsive hammer compact. So the improved is referencing those things that we just talked about. The key surface on both the black and the white keys is a nice matte finish. For some reason, the 120 felt like it was just a slightly nicer finish on top of the white keys. But Kawai, I don't think, has necessarily said that there was a specific improvement. My impression was just that there might have been an improvement in the top surface of the white keys. So that is really critical difference number one. Now, number two, we're going to get playing here because we're into a difference not so much as how the SKEX renders out through the headphones. There definitely are some differences in the reverb engine, and so if you've got the reverb turned on, you are going to hear that because there are some chipset differences between these two instruments. But the core sample is still the same. You're still talking about that SKEX. So through the headphones, you're going to notice a difference when you're dealing with those reverbs, but otherwise, it's very much the same. However, when you are playing live without headphones, when you're using the speakers, that is where you are going to notice a huge difference. So on the ES110, you've got Now you've got tone ports here, just like you've got tone ports over on the ES120. But the ES110 is far more trebly, and I always thought when you were really pushing the volume on the ES110 on certain patches, it was actually a little bit sharp. Like, that's not particularly pleasant in the ear. We're playing both of these at about 90% of maximum volume. When you're down in the bottom 2/3, or even, I'd say, bottom half, not an issue. As soon as you get up in the top half, it's not as rounded as you'd like. They have obviously addressed this on the ES120, because when you're playing the ES120, it's like a fundamentally different tone coming through the speakers. In fact, it's so different that when I had them side by side, I really had to check the headphones to see how different the signal itself was. The signal is not that different. Just those subtle differences in maybe some of how the reverb is behaving, but the core tone sounds identical between these two, to be honest. When you get them through the speakers, it's like an utterly different experience. This is way more rounded, way more kind of almost a flat sound. Just more mids, generally speaking. The mids over here are kind of squished. You really get a sense like kind of like the V EQ on there. The other thing I noticed, and I don't know whether there's been some editing to the touch curve, but this feels more dynamic. Like if I really push this, I can start to get that brightness out of this, whereas I feel like the brightness is there right from the get-go on the ES110. Both are using the same power of amplifier, so I don't believe that's changed. I think it's 10 watts a side. And so that's the speaker difference between the two. A few other quick points about the sound differences between that before we move on to the interface. This has the inclusion of a new upright sample set. I don't know whether it's the same sample set that's been included on some of the other console piano styles. That K60 sample, but there is an upright sample on here that's not on the 110. It's actually quite a good upright sample. This is it here. All of our E-pianos are basically the same between these two. Again, the signal is pretty well the same, but the speaker experience, just like on the acoustic piano, very, very different. You've got this big V EQ happening even on this one. Whereas so much more mid-range happening out of the speakers. Lee is nodding his head like, I can hear that from back here. It's that obvious. Now, in a couple of other ES120 videos, I've keep mentioning this strings and saying that I thought it was a big improvement. Now that I have them side by side, I think all I'm actually hearing is that string sample filtered through a better reverb engine. Just sounds richer and fuller, and I mean, it could be an update to the sample, but I have a feeling it's probably related to that reverb stuff that they've added. Now, the third major difference is the interface. Now, the ES110 had a small number of buttons over here, and I'm not sure whether other people had the same feeling, but for whatever reason, the way it was labeled, the way it was laid out, I always found the ES110 to be slightly tricky to navigate. Over on the ES120, for whatever reason, it's the number of buttons is a little bit more. It has increased. They've changed quick access to some of the functions like transpose and Bluetooth, which is great. But fundamentally, the overall level of access to functionality through the button system over here isn't that different to the ES110, but it feels easier. I don't know why that is. Maybe somebody who knows a heck of a lot more about human psychology and user interface can hop in and answer that question. But when I look at this, it feels like it makes sense. I know where I am on the instrument. I don't have any issue intuitively kind of working my way through that. On the ES110, I always felt like I kind of needed the user manual to really get what was happening here, even though when I'm looking at them side by side, it's like, well, why did I have that feeling there and I don't there? There's some differences, but it's not a huge difference. It just feels easier. I don't know why. So there you go. So that's difference number 3. Difference number 4 is that your ES120 has the Bluetooth audio. And for anybody who's enjoys playing along with tracks, or let's say that you're doing some practicing or learning with tracks, yourself at home, that's part of your practice routine, or maybe you're doing some learning off YouTube or whatever it is, being able to stream audio to your machine has become a kind of a staple function that a lot of people like and are starting to expect. So we had the Bluetooth MIDI over here. Now we've got Bluetooth audio and MIDI happening with the ES120. That's a really big deal. One last final difference, because I've mentioned the 4 major differences, but for people who may be using this in some sort of a home studio setup, they have removed the 5-pin DIN on the ES120, whereas it was available on the ES110. So if you're hooking this up by MIDI through a cabled connection, that's now has to be a USB connection. There is really no other option to it. The ES120, just like the ES110, is available with a matching stand as well as a triple pedal system. It comes out of the box with a small plastic pedal system. The ES110 did have the larger pedal, so that is just something to be aware of if you're going to be doing any kind of serious playing with this. Anybody knows you got to get yourself a good sustain pedal, and Kawai's big fat sustain pedal was one of the best ones on the market. It was beefy, it was indestructible, it felt really good on your foot. So if you can afford it, and if you're going with the ES120 as your main choice for an 88-note basic portable piano, I would just throw that pedal in. Like automatic, don't even think about it. Get the pedal, because that little flimsy plasticky thing, which they all come with at that price point, it's not like I'm picking on Kawai unfairly, they all do it, just get the big pedal. So thank you so much for tuning in to this quick comparison. I hope it's helpful. The ES110 got lots and lots of coverage out there. So for people who are familiar with it, either as owners or, you know, at one point you were considering it and now you're wondering what the ES120 is all about, hopefully we've answered those critical questions for you. If we didn't go quite deep enough for your liking, we have done quite a few other ES120 videos on the channel just within the last month or two that you can drill into, and we really get under the hood and start talking about all of those specs. This really was just a quick snapshot comparison between the previous version and the up-to-date version. Thank you so much for checking us out here on the channel. Please subscribe. Love to see you back. My name is Stu Harrison, and this has been Miriam Pianos on YouTube.